Did you know you can change your lightsaber color to many different types in The Force Unleashed? This was one of the first games to feature colors like the Darksaber, which was officially revealed in the Clone Wars 2 years after, as well as the Gold Saber, which also appeared in the sequels later on. But it does look more like orange than gold in game. Each color comes with a compressed and unstable version for some extra variety. Plus, you can even change costumes in the game to basically become a dark side Anakin Skywalker at his full potential if he never became Vader. With how overpowered the Force is, it's by far the closest we've gotten in any video game without needing mods. In fact, there's a lot of characters from the prequels and the original trilogy to have a mix with the different saber colors. You can even change the Kyber crystals to add buffs, like dark aura damage that slowly saps the enemy's health bar, extra electrical damage that increase its range of effect, makes it chain to other nearby soldiers, and even continues to zap after your attacks are done. But this is just one of many cool details in The Force Unleashed that we're about to revisit in this video. In the PS2 version of the game's intro, the stormtroopers that accompany Vader are blue 501st variants, but in the PS3 version, they were changed to plain white. That's because the opening sequence takes place a year or two after Revenge of the Sith, so they chose to show off an intermediate design between the clones and stormtroopers, since in missions 10 years after, they look normal again. In fact, this game introduced a few new stormtrooper designs that Disney later expanded upon, like the Purge Trooper, which is actually a droid with stormtrooper armor, a Vira blade, and a rocket shoulder mount, similar to the ones introduced in The Mandalorian. The Incinerator Trooper from The Mandalorian, to my knowledge, also first appeared in The Force Unleashed, which is pretty cool, but many other units of the game also never made it to canon, like the Shadow Trooper that can turn invisible, the Evo Troopers with protective shields from lightning and other natural elements, as well as the Stormtrooper Commander with its really nice blue markings. Although the lightsaber combat isn't the most complex in the PS3 and 360 versions of the game, some combos have really cool animations that I think don't get enough praise. These aren't the longest combos, but the saber swings and attacks are really well animated, with many attacks mixing in either Force Lightning or Force Push to amplify Starkiller's swings. The way enemies react to some of the bigger hits are also really cool, since the developers focused on physics as one of the game's highlighted features. Holding up enemies with the Force will cause them to panic and try holding on to grounded objects, or they'll duck under objects that are flying right above them. And it's by far the funnest thing charging up a Force Blast and bowling pin the enemies down a narrow corridor. The environment also has some cool interactions, like shattering glass in space will cause a vacuum that can suck out enemies before the emergency door kicks in. And in the Death Star, stormtroopers can get vaporized by the Mega Laser Charge Beam. I really hope we get a remaster of this game with all the physics and cool attack animations, since it's so much fun. As you try saving Princess Leia from the Empire on Kashyyyk, you eventually go into a room with an enslaved Wookiee surrounded by the heads of creatures from across the galaxy, including the Geonosis Arena monsters, the Gorax from Endor that appeared in a TV special for the original trilogy, the Krayt Dragon that was eventually showed off in The Mandalorian, as well as a Gungan frozen in carbonite, which is actually kinda hilarious. Although this room is owned by an Imperial officer named Ozic Stern who game hunts creatures, right after Order 66, clones were given orders to capture and enslave each planet's native inhabitants, which is what also happens in the beginning of the game, eventually leading to Kashyyyk's complete occupation by the Imperial. Just don't forget to free the Wookiees from these cages, since they will help you out, and it's just morally ethical to do so, until they accidentally get caught in the crossfire. At the end of the first mission as Starkiller, by jumping off and force dashing onto this ledge, you can find the helmet of RC-113A, the leader of Delta Squadron from Republic Commando. Plus, in the DLC packs, they added a plain white Commando as a wearable skin. But this isn't the only references to the Clone Wars. Ram Koda wears upper body armor similar to those seen used by Jedi in the Clone Wars, which is also a DLC outfit for Starkiller as well. The DLC even has a Clone Wars themed costume costume for Starkiller and the animation style, which would have been so cool to see him in. In fact, we actually just made a custom Clone Wars themed animated phone background in celebration of this year's May the 4th, along with all the other benefits, so if you want to support the channel, definitely go check it out. Other non-Clone Wars references include the bounty hunter suit using a chest piece similar to Boba Fett's armor, while the Industrial Explorer outfit has a respirator and power core that mimics Darth Vader's design. The two DLC costumes that he wears during the events of A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back has 5 lightsabers on them, 2 of which on the back are Vader's and Darth Maul's. In fact, the DLC costumes are way more interesting overall since they weren't afraid to try unique ideas, especially with some of the edgier designs like this extreme Sith version of Galen where you can see his organs in tubes. The Force Unleashed has 3 DLC levels, 2 of which follow the dark side ending where Starkiller defeats Vader and replaces him as the Emperor's apprentice. You then go to Tatooine in episode 4 and take out Jabba the Hutt and Boba Fett in an epic boss fight, after which you hunt down Ben Kenobi. This boss fight is pretty one-sided with Ben Kenobi being thrown into the Millennium Falcon's thrusters. Starkiller is so strong that he even manhandles Obi-Wan as a Force ghost. After that insane piece of fanfiction, you then go to episode 5 where you raid Echo Base to fight Luke. After also humiliating him for around 5 minutes or so, you eventually beat him and turn him to the dark side, becoming your secret apprentice, which is such a cool what if scenario. I also like how Starkiller's regular lightning is blue, while in the DLC it turns purple like Palpatine's, and Luke's Force lightning is red. The final DLC mission is in the middle of the main story where Starkiller goes back to the Jedi Temple to find out more about his dad, where you have to go through a series of Jedi trials to progress through the temple, including a battle with an evil version of Starkiller, sort of like Luke's battle with Vader in the Dagobah cave. Although this is one mission in the PS3 and 360 versions, this is stretched out to more missions in the PS2 version of the game. You basically revisit the temple after every Jedi encounter to fight these Sith bosses, with the final trial being a Force Vision battle with your dad in the Jedi Council chamber, which is such a cool setting for a boss battle. In fact, the PS2 version has a few extra missions than the flagship on Xbox 360 and PS3, as well as changes to existing missions like featuring new mini-bosses, like this weird Gungan pilot that gets humiliated by Galen a few seconds later, and these quote-unquote Mandalorians riding a giant gorilla droid in Bespin, which completely changes how some of the missions play out. And although I always love extra content, many of these places seem like side missions and don't really add much relevancy to the story. The Bespin mission, for example, where you find Coda, is changed to happen on Nar Shaddaa on the PS2 version, with basically the same objectives, and the new stuff I mentioned earlier happens on Bespin instead. Some lighting and environmental changes are also noticeable when switching between the two versions, but the main difference is that the PS2 has a dual mode where you can play as other characters from the franchise, which is really cool. The PSP version also has these unique Order 66 missions where you play as different Jedi trying to survive through a series of clone trooper waves, as well as missions reenacting scenes from the films, which is so cool, and I would have loved to see this on the PS3 and Xbox 360 versions. They sometimes use the same audio from the films, which makes for some really derpy adaptations.
Kill him. I shouldn't.
But for some reason, Obi-Wan defeats Anakin by force pushing him into a metal structure that unceremoniously falls into the lava river. And that's pretty much it. The PSP version also has a battle mode that matches different heroes for an all-out battle, but since everyone has the same moveset, it's not too special. All these changes make playing the other versions of The Force Unleashed worthwhile. The boss battle settings in this game are really unique. Karsden Paratus, for example, lives in the junkyards of Raxus Prime and created a makeshift Jedi temple. This rogue Jedi even made junk sculptures of the Jedi Council out of pure insanity, which you completely ruin in the boss fight. On Felucia, there's also Shaak Ti's fight with the Ancient One, the largest Sarlacc pit in the galaxy. Heck, you eventually return to go inside it as well, with textures that are a little too realistic basic for my liking. Ram Koda's boss fight literally takes place on a space station as it's falling down to the planet's orbit, which eventually starts to burn up. But probably the best parts about the boss fights are the QuickTime events. Although this style of gameplay hasn't seen much light in recent games, some of these game sequences can be filled with life thanks to the detailed animations. This also happens with the medium-sized bosses as well, with the AT-ST finisher probably being the coolest. In fact, for certain mini-bosses, the game doesn't let you take them down normally without doing the QuickTime event, which is pretty funny to think about considering I just have to snap this guy's neck to finish him off. Now, there's so many great animations that I don't have enough time to mention all of them, but I think the DLC's QuickTime events are probably the most over the top, but if you're paying for one of these levels, you might as well make it as crazy as possible. That's of course if we're not including Galen bringing down the Star Destroyer, which is forever the most iconic moment that defined this video game's franchise. But there's so much more cool attack animations and what if scenarios found in other Star Wars video games, like the Revenge of the Sith adaptation, where you can find out more about in this video here.